Hello everybody. I'd like to first of all thank Sasha and all the organizations. There's so many of them, so I wouldn't want to name them, but it's extremely encouraging and moving to learn about the depth of support for Israel here in Germany, both in terms of the number of organizations, in terms of the number of people from civil society, just members of German society, citizens, people who were standing outside in the line. The line was so long out there that I thought initially, well, it would probably start later because everybody came late. Then I walked in, I realized that also within the hall it was already full of people. So it's extremely encouraging and moving, especially for me, as somebody who was invited here as the representative of the Israeli Knesset, of Israel's shrine of democracy, to represent and to strengthen our joint relationship. I'm not only a representative of the Knesset, I'm also a grandson of two German Jews, not from Frankfurt. My grandfather is from Hamburg, and my grandmother from Berlin. So in a different circumstance, maybe I could have been there, not here. But history led both my grandparents. I think some of them belonged, I'm not sure, to some, maybe to the grandparents of some of these organizations, some of the Zionist and youth movement organizations, and therefore it was easier for them in the 30s to leave Germany when the situation became problematic here for them, and to move to Israel. And the German Jewish community in Israel played an extremely important role in establishing the new Zionist state, in establishing Israeli academia, Israeli legal and judicial system, Israeli industry, Israeli science. It was a group of extremely knowledgeable, well-trained, committed, good citizens. They were only never good in one skill or one craft, which is politics. They were never represented in Israeli politics, but in every other sphere. So I think if you scrape the surface of every Israeli history is there, not only in terms of the relations with Germany, but history in terms of the historical story of every Israeli family that their ancestors either came from Europe, escaped from Europe before the Holocaust, just after, escaped persecution from Russia, from the East, from Arab countries that pretty much expelled all their Jewish communities immediately after the Jewish state was established. And then after 7 wars, the first war was the day Israel was announced. 7 Arab armies attacked the 600,000 Jewish population. And all of us have family stories, relatives who survived, were injured, who didn't survive those events. So for us, you know, to tell us, sometimes people say, why are you so paranoid about your security? Given our history, we were reckless if we weren't paranoid. So we're paranoid, and we think our security is not something that is just well established and something that we can rely upon, but it's something that we have to strengthen and nurture and pay attention to on a daily basis. And this is not the only foundation for Israeli-German relations, not only our shared history, we also have shared values. Germany managed to create over the past 65 years one of the most impressive liberal democracies in the world that respects human rights, respects minorities, respects the whole democratic process. And so did Israel under very difficult circumstances. A state that is under constant attack, with no natural resources, with a poor population of immigrants from all over the world. We created a thriving democracy where we argue with each other all the time. And we managed to create a functioning society. So it's based on a common history and common values, but beyond all of that, also common interests. and the common interests that build this strong bond between Israel and Germany are ever more pronounced today and going into the future. And I wanted to say a few words about those interests and about what we should expect from each other going forward, because the world is now changing and some of the trends are problematic and negative, and we have enough internal and inherent power, both moral and material, to deal with those trends, but we have to make a decision that it's actually something that we want to do. So what are those problematic global trends? First of all, the world is changing. After 65 years after World War II, we're seeing a world whereby the relative importance of Europe is declining. The relative strength, both economic and military, of the United States is declining. We have new forces in the world arena. Everybody talks about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and other forces. We have a reduced willingness of the United States to project and use its power in order to serve as the reservoir of freedom, reservoir of liberal democracies throughout the world. And those changes, in light of challenges in other parts of the world, but especially also in the Middle East, in light of those challenges, I think that Germany, that has survived some of these economic crises and emerged quite strong, I think those global changes impose on Germany a particular duty, a duty to lead. A duty to lead, obviously, while you take into account the past and the constraints that the past imposes on Germany and on the way it can behave in the international arena, where Germany can no longer just enjoy the United States or the US umbrella of, that pretty much protects the world order and the dominance of liberal democracies. Today, Germany has to help and support the United States and to play a more central role in the global arena, and in specific in the Middle East. And I'll mention just two trends in the Middle East. The Middle East today is changing. If we look at the Middle East today, and 2 decades ago, or even 1 decade ago, we see a Middle East whereby Iran is becoming a strong and rising and dominant force. Iran that is acquiring nuclear weapons. Iran that is practicing, preaching, and working towards genocides, and trying to, they're talking about it, they're planning it, it's part of their ideology, it's part of their training. They have a declared goal of annihilating the state of Israel. Iran that is spreading international terror, supporting terror organizations, both in the Middle East, but not only in the Middle East. And Iran that is spreading an ideology, an illiberal, Islamist, radical ideology that wants to change first the face of the Middle East, and later the face of the world, to a closed place that violates human rights, violates the rights of women, that changes the nature of economic relations, of security relations, and all of this in the back door of Europe. Now we've seen Iran not only talking about those things, but actually moving towards implementing them. We see Iran sending its arms to Lebanon, and today we have Hezbollah in Lebanon that is becoming the dominant political and security force in Lebanon, and changing this place that used to be a nice pro-Western economically developed spot into a radical Shiite place that implements Iranian ideology. In Israel's northern border, deployed there a guerrilla Islamist organization with Iranian funding, Iranian training, Iranian doctrine. They did the same with Hamas, and they tried to establish Hamas as the leading force, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. The only reason why in the West Bank today there's the Palestinian Authority, and we may have disagreements with them, and it's legitimate, it's also legitimate for Israel and Germany to disagree, as long as we understand the basic notion that Israeli and German relationship is an unbreakable bond, a historical bond, a bond that has a future, a bond that while we can have an open and critical discussion between us, we understand that this relationship is something that will, aside from maybe our relationship with the United States, is the most important relationship of Israel.